when using ISPACE, it's always best to use it within a paragraph. It makes it a lot easier. It can be done at the start of a paragraph, absolutely, to help create that cohesion between paragraphs. But when it comes to writing your descriptions of your character, it's always best to start with just simply introduce who your character is. So that's what I've done here. I've started with just introducing who this character is. The Hungarian horntail is a vicious creature found in the wizard world, known for its aggressive behaviour and ill temper. So I've introduced this character to the reader. What I'm now going to do is, because I've introduced the character, I'm thinking in my head that I've described this character as being aggressive and ill-tempered. Well, what happens if I come across a horntail? You know, if my reader does come across the Hungarian horntail, what is it going to do? So that's when I'm going to look at my ISPACE and think about what's going to be best to introduce that sentence. So I'm going to use an adverbial phrase of time. So time adverbial. When this creature is met, be extremely aware that it is incredibly territorial and will defend itself. And then I'll want to think of an adverb, perhaps just to finish it off, and will defend itself. I'll have a think about that and perhaps add on it later. The important thing is how I've used this adverbial phrase within my sentences and within the paragraph to help to join it all together. So I've stated a fact, I've stated something about this horntail. The Hungarian horntail is a vicious creature found in the wizard world, known for its aggressive behaviour and ill temper. So now the likelihood is the reader will say, well, what do I do if I were to ever to meet one? You need to answer that question. When this creature is met, be extremely aware that it is incredibly territorial and will defend itself. So I've used ISPACE to join these sentences together to create that cohesion. Now, you'll have also noticed that at the end of the phrase, I've got my comma. So if I were to take this out, it would make sense on its own. So we can check that. Be extremely aware that it is incredibly territorial and will defend itself. So that sentence on its own makes sense, but I've put in the adverbial phrase of time so that the reader knows when this is going to happen. It's happening when the creature is met. Now, that's all quite formal. Maybe I want to start looking at being a bit more descriptive. So I might want to look at my ISPACE and start thinking about, well, what strategies, what techniques have I got there that can be descriptive? I could perhaps use a simile because we did that yesterday. So, well, I'll tell you what, because it's in the name, horn tail, there's going to be something about this tail. I'm looking at the picture and it looks to me a little bit like a mace or like a really powerful weapon. So I could say like a brutal weapon. Now, because I've come to the end of that simile, like a brutal weapon, I've got to make sure that I've got a comma at the end of that phrase. So like a brutal weapon, this monstrous beast will strike its enemies with dragons. Trying to think of an adjective now to describe that tail, just to give it like a little bit more emphasis on the power it is. Alright, there you go. Powerful. Dragon's powerful tail. So now, just within that, I've used two very different sentence openers that help to join all of this together. I've used one that's quite formal, using a time adverbial, talking about when something's happening, and I've used a simile as a sentence opener to add that extra description in there. As I say, it's often better to include this within the paragraph and to get yourself going first before you try and use them. However, you can just give yourself a bit of a practice first. So you might want to perhaps just write a couple of sentences that include ISPACE about your character before you piece it all together within a paragraph. So you could just say, like a brutal weapon, this terrifying beast will strike ferociously with its powerful tail. That's fine. Tail I meant. So that's absolutely fine, because you're still using that ISPACE to add description, and in this case it's a simile, and so on. Now, across two paragraphs, my advice would be to perhaps use 4 to 2 in each paragraph, and perhaps maybe as you go, just maybe tick them off so you're not repeating yourself. It's okay to use 2 similes at the start of a sentence, but just making sure they're not in the same paragraph, because it'll lose the impact, and it will eventually become quite boring if it's just becoming repetitive. All right, and if I'm really struggling, then I might use the help sheets, which have all the different examples that you could use, so like the word banks.